In the beginning, singularities, associations, and workshops decided where power rested in the city. And then a man said, "Let there be light." And it was so fucking atrocious. I mean, a guy scraped his face on a piano until he killed 300,000 people and inspired a war between edgy band geeks and Eldritch Book Club. Now, instead of tech bros being the only force in the world, any lovesick puppy having a crash out or anxious postal worker can have the power of God and anime on their side. And the world still hasn't recovered from the consequences. Then a rogue AI decided that it'd be funny to do it again, and now we're all eternally coated in sin. And shins. This is what I like to call Wave 2 of Project Moon's power system, and somehow, it's gone significantly better than the first. I covered this a year ago, back when we only had 6 sins to talk about and barely anything to say about Shin. And now, we're in dire need of an update since there's plenty more to go over with Shin and how it's related to the 9 sins worth addressing. And if that sounds unbelievable, then clearly, we have much to discuss. So hop into the Peccatula wagon, clear your mind, and get comfy as I give you the tour of Project Moon's modern power system. Now, before we dig into the exact mechanics of the Sins, Shin, and Mang, it's important to address that all of these powers are derived from the light. And if you're not caught up about what the hell the light even is, then check out this video since that is a huge topic in itself. But if we're gonna discuss Wave 2 of the light's powers, we need to talk about how Wave 1's work first, since all of them relate back to the user's emotional state, and frankly, their emotional maturity. Now, the first wave of light introduced the city en masse to the distortion phenomenon and ego manifestation. These again are topics that deserve their own tour, but for our purposes, it was a power system that a person could only make use of if they faced a hardship that pushed them to their mental brink. Whether it was their family dying right in front of them, or their religion being proven real and anything in between, any trauma of sufficient impact would put the victim on the radar of a woman named Carmen. And Carmen, bless her heart, tried to help by telling the person to be selfish and act only in their own interests. And should that poor soul accept what she says is true, they will distort into a new creature of greater power that's somehow related to whatever they're going through right now. But if you gave her the old thanks but no thanks and found a different way to steal your resolve, then you'd manifest your own ego in the form of tools on your person. Now again, there are a ton of nuances to this power system, including a lot that could happen to you after you distort or manifest ego. But all that's important here is that the pipeline goes human plus trauma equals Carmen. Carmen plus yes equals distortion. And Carmen plus no equals ego. And human plus trauma plus Carmen plus no plus clown plus yes plus blue plus you give me light, me cry, eat light, me give orange, you give me sunbath, give me fillin'. It's just that simple. In short, Wave 1 is all about power derived from a trauma response in the moment. In contrast, Wave 2's power system is more closely related to someone's day-to-day coping mechanisms, both the good and the bad. In other words, they're ways to access the light without having the worst day of your life. And that is for the better and for the worse. So let's start with the worse. Now, I made a video last year that touched on this power system, mainly the sins, so like with the light, check that out if you want the full origin story. But enough time's passed that I gotta make some corrections. Because, yeah, we've only been getting solid exposition on city mechanics since Time Killing Time, and there still isn't any official explanation on what the sins are in universe. Hohenheim?
My salamis!
Seriously, I control F to the entire damn intervalo and no definition appears once. But the least I can do is update y'all as the shot gets clearer. Case in point, I said that Sins and Shin were effectively the same, just with the Sins being different flavors of that Shin. We'll get into more about Shin later, but it's safe to say that while the two are related, it's more accurate to say that the Sins and Shin are two ways to absorb the light than being the same energy outright. It'd be like saying distortions and ego are the same thing, or that your stepdad is as good as your first dad, because unlike your first dad, your sins are always with you. The point is that sins are a form of light that's absorbed by each person over the course of their life and take on different qualities based on the thoughts they have. So when we talk about sin, think of it as talking about energy or electricity. It's a quantifiable resource. And as we can see in every single combat skill the sinners come across, it's virtually impossible to meet a person in the city that isn't colored by them in some way. They're like microplastics. You won't notice them 99% of the time, but scientists say you're eating a credit card's worth of them every week, and not even the Dieci can beat them out of you. Now, there's currently no way to quantify just how much sin is inside a person or what a lethal dose is yet, but what we do know is that sin is influenced by the person's memories or feelings expressed in a given moment, and that people can be made more or less resilient to certain sins they're exposed to. As shown by the sin resistances across several enemies, there's a trend of people being neutral to all sins until they get exposed to a certain amount of light-related forces. So the closer a person gets to the supernatural, the more the sins start to matter. In fact, there's one instance where your sin can greatly impact the rest of your life. And that's when talking to the Antichrist herself, Carmen. Because before the second wave hit, there were only 2 outcomes of her little talks. But now with the advent of sins, there's a third option, and it's the worst by far. 'Cause yeah, Wave 2 invented a way to gatekeep distorting. If you ain't even able to process what you're dealing with like a person and are instead consumed by different flavors of sinful thoughts that lead nowhere, then you will fail to even distort, becoming one of these 7 currently known Peccatula. Unlike distortions, which can at least often talk or have some sense of humanity to them, these critters are all aggressive and animalistic. Hell, John Scientist here went as far to say they had no remnants of humanity left within them. And whereas every distortion is unique, every Peccatulum we know of is derived from one of the 7 sins. Not only that, but every Peccatulum is capable of growing into 3 stages like a starter Pokemon. And Dante says that the 3rd stage is the final in their notes, but me and Salami Sam here ain't really buying that it ends like this. Either way, there's a lot more to talk about with the sins now than a year ago. So just like last time, let's update our knowledge on how every sin works. Starting with...
The nature of fire is to burn and burn until there is nothing left to be burned.
Yeah, they sure are mad, aren't they? Wrath is all about anger, the kind that destroys without discretion. And it may have taken until puberty, but its Pekka sure got that memo. This beauty's a lot juicier than it looks on the surface. Boiling water coursing through its veins that'll either inject into you as a youngster or ignite into full pillars of fire with its big meaty claws. And of course, this sin is associated with burn. The status is as simple as the sin. Every turn, you take damage equal to the potency, and it loses 1 count. But if we take a look at how the status has evolved over time, PM has leaned harder into this idea of Wrath destroying indiscriminately. The LCE Faust and both Magic Bullet Otis drops are powerful, but can kill themselves or allies. And Fire Fist Gregor, Indicant's Trial Rodion, and even as far back as Liu Ryoshu have effects that spread burn over to several enemies on kill. Hell, the P.E.K.K.A. itself gets greater attack weight with enough burn in its 3rd stage. I ain't rating these sins, but if I were eating them, this would be an elegant chili that gets straight to the point and makes me feel like death on the toilet. But, on to more approachable topics.
An obsession to spread a fragment of what forms the self. A desire to propagate, to breed.
Can I just say, I have learned more about lust ever since being in any kind of gacha community than the previous 90% of my life. And sure, most of that is from the French. Whoa! But as we can see in the checkup event, lust also refers to any desire to share yourself with others, whether it's in your knowledge, your experience, or just your opinions. And when you think about it like that, really every YouTube video you've watched, every essay, every tier list, every stream is an expression of the creator's lust. And yes, that includes the Salami Sam joke. Have fun with that thought. Unlike Wrath though, there are only 2 current stages of the lust Peccatula. And considering the way they're going, I'm not sure I'll be able to show the Class 3 version on YouTube. But with what we know, the P.E.K.K.A. matches this hopeless desire to be close with a literally guarded eye that's hiding arms that are either too flimsy to grasp anything or much too unwieldy to grip anything. And now that I've said your activation word, yes, Cromer's entire resonated form matches this sentiment too. Even her notorious piercing gaze being something Sinclair identifies in both of the Lust Peccas. It's really fitting considering that the attempted closeness they seek, even if Cromer's is thinly veiled cruelty, ends in the target being pierced and bleeding. And a character with bleed will take damage every time it flips an attack coin, effectively punishing it for approaching its target. And as the status has changed over time, the most prominent evolution has been the Blood Feast resource. Because what's more lustful than a status that isn't just spread across all units, but steeped into the stage itself? It's even more messed up as you learn that the La Mancha Land IDs get stronger the more people struggle to approach each other. Put all this together, and lust is a strangely cruel sin that begins with the desire to share yourself with others, and results in those involved suffering with every attempt to approach until all that's left is a fine red puddle. Or at least that's what abstinence class taught me in middle school. They also said it would make your piss yellow. You know what else is yellow?
They are directionless and unmoving, completely surrendered to inertia.
And they really said that our job was to kill them as quickly as possible, huh? Sloth. Proof that Luigi winning by doing absolutely nothing is a one-way ticket to eternal damnation. On the surface, sloth would seem like the sin of laziness or lack of attentiveness. But while that is mentioned in the P.E.K.K.A.'s observation logs, sloth's meaning seems to evolve with every class. In Class 2, Yisong mentions that in the P.E.K.K.A. rooting itself to the ground, it's made itself willing to change. But it stays as lazy and barely cognizant even by Peccatulum standards as ever. And Yisong comments that the combination of that willingness to change for the purpose of remaining lazy is a form of resilience it chooses to have. Then in the Class 3 logs, the P.E.K.K.A.'s fully ingrained itself into the ground to become this miniature mountain. While this made it stronger and more stable, it no longer wavers or keeps the free movement it used to have. It has resorted to becoming a living obstacle in order to avoid change, barely being considered a human being in its own eyes. So the more this thing evolves, the more it bases its entire existence on becoming immovable. And as a result, the idea of sloth being laziness quickly becomes sloth being inflexible and stubborn. This is why Gregor, Merceau, and Faust were teamed up in the Sloth trial in the checkup event, since despite being reliable, they're also known for being rigid and headstrong. Well, maybe not Gregor, but you know, he hasn't served the plot much since Kanto 1, so we can call him lazy here. Now, much like its related sin, Tremor has proven to be willing to change in an effort to stay the same. The original mechanic it had of stacking itself to burst on certain moves and up the enemy's stagger threshold has transformed into anywhere from making staggers more impactful or likely, to flat debuffs, to flat out damage, or even a buff that somehow makes you faster because you're supposed to be reversing inertia? And that's not to mention that you can combine all the different kinds of Tremor onto an enemy with superposition if you're smart about it. The main takeaway here is Tremor and Sloth are perfect for explaining that there are a lot of ways to make sure someone you target will sure as hell not get anything done. Hell, there's a reason all T-Corp IDs are Tremor-based anyway. Man, we really gotta kill and eat Hubert, huh?
They are not satisfied with satiation alone. The roots continue to grow, seeking increasingly greater supply of nutrients.
I know! I'm a sucker for big teeth, and this little Venus flytrap animorph will gladly take advantage of that!
No.
God, what a beauty. Oh, Gluttony. Just like wrath, there ain't that much behind those beady little eyes. And just like lust, this sin is all about desire. But instead of wanting to project itself onto others, gluttony is all about taking in anything and everything it can to fill the gaping emotional void within. Whether that's in the form of food, recognition, knowledge, wealth, you name it. Both the sin and these little half-grown suckers here will never be satisfied. Hell, the P.E.K.K.A. itself isn't even capable of swallowing whatever it eats. The poor thing just doesn't know what else to do. Speaking of not knowing what to do, Rupture is a status that deals additional damage to those affected by it every time they're hit. And boy, have there been many a conversation about how Project Moon does not know how to balance it. Despite having more than 1 in every 4 IDs as of writing involve Rupture in some way, this is the only status whose evolution over time has arguably made it weaker instead of stronger. Instead of finding ways to evolve Rupture, the modern changes have been more to restrict it, since Rupture already had the capability to deal massive damage, all because of one little blonde boy with a red sheet who was kind enough to tell you not to come to school tomorrow. Because fast forward forward 2 years later, and PM had a fling with trying to cap Rupture, tried and failed to get it into an arranged marriage with Bleed, and then decided the blonde boy was better off homeschooled. And if you want to know more about how hard it was to make Rupture satisfying, check out this video. Thankfully though, Season 6 finally gave the community the first true evolution in the form of death rights. While we don't know how far the death right mechanic will go in-game, it currently acts as a unique status that's either similar to Rupture or directly supports it. It's a lot like Tremor in that it makes Rupture work like a mark of death. But instead of only having one kind at a time that's simple to keep active, death rights are harder to proc and maintain, yet varying kinds can be stacked at once. So just like Gluttony, it's all fleeting, but you can still get a ton going. Oh, and yeah, there was this one thing I left out of the video last time we talked about Gluttony. Seems like it was pretty important to the lore too, so I know people will get sad if I forget to mention it this go around. Oh, speaking of sad...
The pressure suffocates you from all directions. No matter how much you thrash around, desperately looking for something to grab onto, all you find is futility. Such is Gloom.
The art of making people miserable is an elegant one. Anger, jealousy, and panic can all fuel people to take action that has the chance to better their lives. But sadness? Helplessness? Allowing fear to become you? These all have the opposite effect to deprive a person of action. And these are the thoughts related to Gloom. Of course, both the P.E.K.K.A. and gameplay of Limbus show how Gloom has evolved beyond melancholy and drowning thoughts over time. The Gloom P.E.K.K.A. starts off as this gorgeous little water dumpling you could chew on for ages, and evolves into a fat, wet fly that looks like it could reach top speeds of 60 Lexapro prescriptions per hour. And according to its observation logs, even looking at this creature causes the mind to sink lower. All the more so if you come into contact with the water it contains. Naturally, this translates in gameplay to the sinking status in Limbus. Anyone that gets hit while affected by sinking takes SP damage. Or if you're beyond having mental health, Gloom damage. And in my opinion, the ways sinking and Gloom have evolved mirror each other better than any other sin in the game, because misery loves company. Sure, sinking deluge is the quickest way to fashion depressing thoughts into a bomb, but that's old news. Echoes of the Manor and impending ruin both make sinking able to reduce the chance to flip heads on any unit now. And the Bygone Days ego and the uninvited and butterfly statuses offer a means to make sinking more potent and give some healing to those that inflict it. It effectively allows the sinners to become emotional blood fiends and heal more the worse the enemy feels. And hey, the P.E.K.K.A. is getting in on this too. Once the amoeba's all grown up, it gets decked out with a signature move that can deal sinking deluge on 3 sinners if you let it. And of course, that comes with a passive that throws sinking at everyone except the most well-adjusted sinner. Because when you're feeling stuck or despondent, sharing your woes can be healthy. But do it wrong, and you're just feeding off of offloading your baggage onto others. Because again, misery loves company. But then we get the flip side and...
It oft claims trailblazers, or those who have never tasted failure.
Yo, question to the audience. How many of y'all were gifted kids in grade school? Cause man, we sure had that coming, huh? In Limbus, pride is defined as the thoughts that praise us for who we are and what we're capable of, as well as the thoughts that justify any harm we bring because of how capable we are. Neither Faust nor Hohenheim will let us forget they're both geniuses, or that humanity's pride can be represented by the invention of the wheel. The P.E.K.K.A.'s design also supports this as a large spiked wheel that tramples over anything in its path simply because it can. And the Stage 2 version even has hands to lean further into that sentiment of pride being related to human invention. I'm not entirely sure what we can expect of Stage 3, but my best guess is that we'll see a mutation that pride uses to justify its own dominance. Maybe some kind of armor, or use of tools even to follow the whole invention deal. Either way, much like pride cometh before the crash, poise cometh before the crit. Freiverbs 1984. Poise is a positive status that gives the user a 5% chance to inflict a critical hit for every potency. So if you get to 20, welcome to Crit City, enjoy your stay. And over time, Poise has evolved into something like an additive status. Recent IDs have it as that secret sauce that either drips it on top of burn or rupture IDs, or just juices up your crit rate and power so hard that you've got to be nerfed by local gun regulations. Even just chaining Pride and A-Res is starting to become a trademark of the Sin too. And especially counting the latest drops, Pride has tried to make a theme out of either killing your allies for permanent buffs, or at least making that a risk of using powerful moves, which, while simple, the evolution of poise comes down to power creep and more ways to reward getting those crits, which feels fitting for the Sin that likes to pat itself on the back. Hell, Pride is even getting into the business of integrating itself into other Sins as well while still keeping its shape. And that's why it's really impressive that Dong Rong, who denies all, ended up not having a single Pride skill and was still committed to being an entire embodiment of Gluttony, huh? See, I didn't forget about him. Just goes to show Pride always takes and Gluttony always hungers. Not so shocking, really. But what is shocking is how numb all of you are to being asked to like and subscribe! Like, fuck, it's such a common phrase now that the words have lost all meaning. But here's the thing, I bet I can give you a better reason to press those buttons than just about any other PM creator. Now seriously, hear me out here. It's all by asking one little question. Can you guess how many YouTube videos I've posted in 2025? Time's up! Counting this one, it's 20! And yet, only about a third of those can be found on this channel. Now why's that? Because while I love my moods, they ain't living with what I like to call rent and bills. So most of my time goes to being an editor for other folks, with the stuff we get here being a second priority. But now's the time I want to change that. See, the reason I even started editing for other people in the first place was to afford to be a Limbus creator. But as it turns out, that ship gets rocky. If something happens, like say the company that paid your entire living wage shuts down, it means spending 4 to 5 months rebuilding that boat from the ground up. And after going through this slump twice now, I ain't exactly keen on doing it again. But there is some good news. YouTube is actually helping me out a lot more than it did a year ago. And that's in large part to the folks that, yeah, liked the video, subscribed to the channel, and especially those that became members or joined the Patreon. Hell, I'm even making more perks for those members because that's legit the best way a person can not only support me, but the editors I've taken on to make most of the videos that came out this year even possible. And I really want to keep doing right by them. So, look, I know you want to get back to the video, but I ask again, do you want to see more? Because if so, any of these 3 things will help make it happen. Thank you to everyone who supported this channel, even if it was through watching for only a moment. Making these has brought so much joy to my life, and now that we've addressed that, let's talk about the Thief of Joy.
Anyone who's been subject to both static shock and the envy of others must know that the latter stings in the same manner as the former does.
Well yeah, Boltneck. Don and Easy put it perfectly well that someone getting something you wanted out of nothing but circumstance will put some volts into your system. Such is envy. Now, for a long time, this entire sin was an enigma since we only got the P.E.K.K.A for it about a year ago. And the last time I talked about it, I said that the sin represented the perversion of something wholesome. But now that we have actual observation logs, it's time for another correction. Envy is instead defined by thoughts of one's own inadequacy and lack of self-worth, and the jealousy of others that comes from these thoughts. We can see this especially in sinners like Rodion and Heathcliff, because Rodion's entire being is putting up a front of being capable that has a fin's chance in the inferno of fooling anyone. And Heathcliff's own Kanto emphasizes just how much of his own self-worth and desire for revenge influenced not only his own actions, but that of the more evil and freaky doppelganger that wanted to commit mass heathicide. Seriously, I know he's not a P.E.K.K.A since he can talk, but Earl King Heathcliff may be up there with Cromer and Dong Rong for a boss embodying a sin well. But on to the P.E.K.K.As. These suckers are the most unusual of any sin since we can't know what they look like until they're corpses. I mean, they got the beady eye and fleshy tendrils common to their kin, plus the little electric shocks help add to the motif, but any living Invidiae just looks like a sinner in any given ID, complete with all the skills and ego that they could use. It makes me wonder if these fellas are directly formed out of the mirror instead of other people that failed to distort, but I'm not ready to commit to that theory yet. Gameplay-wise, the stronger versions only change by getting a flat armor and damage buff. And envy is most closely associated with the charge status. IDs get charge and charge count by using moves and spend charge count to make others stronger. Simple as. As for its evolution, well, PM finally remembered that charge has a left number too. So modern units will get more charge potency the more they spend charge count, and get some flat buffs as that potency rises. It's kinda cute how much this acts as an inverse to Pride and Poise. Poise easily gets the big left number high and is built off of self-confidence while needing more of the right number, and Charge counts like a budding inferiority complex that gets stronger the more you project it. Nature really is beautiful, ain't it? And that's all of the Peccatula and Sins we know of as of now. 7 salami slices that represent the human experience and half of the new wave power system. Except it's not.
I'm lying to you. Your trust and goodwill are nothing to me.
Black and white slices be upon thee.
My salamis! Also, my name is not Boltneck.
Let's talk about madness and angst. 2 sins that have 0 mentions in canon Limbus to date, but still exist in the game's source code. Very little is known about these suckers aside from the fact that they are associated with the colors black and white, and every single time they're referenced, they're shown to do fatal damage to an enemy, or any unit, really. While nothing's confirmed, I expect that these damage values aren't placeholders and are intended to be fatal, so these act as some kind of super sins in a later stage. I mean, it feels more likely than these being added on as the 8th and 9th sins, since that would take massive changes to the UI, eco balancing, and having to factor in the new IDs that gotta generate these as resources. But just for fun, here's an idea on how they could work. Angst being the darkest and edgiest sin could be the worst embodiment of the more destructive sins like wrath, sloth, gloom, and envy. Really just reveling in it like you're some kind of punished Shadow the Hedgehog. And gameplay-wise, it'd be a great excuse to make a sin based around poison. And maybe throw in a poison that affects SP too for good measure. As for madness, this feels like it could be an enlightened but warped fascination like the more constructive sins of lust, gluttony, and pride. Maybe throw in wrath for spectacle. It gives me this whole vibe of being between a mad scientist and zealous prophet that drank the Kool-Aid one too many times where they have this kind of god complex. I think it'd be a lot of fun for them to have their status be a self-given one that evolves, like the Blood Fiends had that gets fueled every time they clash, whether or not they win. That way, they're like a conspiracy theorist on the internet. They win by getting both good and bad attention. It also feels like a great opportunity to make a twisted version of Shin, which would go a long way to making... Oh, right! We still haven't gotten to Shin yet. Man, I bet some of y'all have been waiting a while to hear about that, huh? Well, no time like the present. If the sins represent the unhealthy coping mechanisms people have, then Shin is a more virtuous power derived from, going to therapy and practicing all that feel-good mindfulness-ish people were on about back in the 2010s. I joke, but Shin is an especially rare and unknown practice, because it's the only one in the PM Light power system that needs to be intentionally trained. As shown in Leviathan, Shin is manifested by clearing the user's mind of thoughts and focusing on a specific memory, and channeling that into energy that the person can then manipulate in a variety of ways. We see through passives in Kantos 6 and 8 that Shin can be used to maintain a user's mental well-being through SP. In Kanto 8's cutscenes, Zilu shows that she can use Shin as a form of armor against Lei Hang's one free hit, and both Lei Hang and Merceau's Lei Hang ID use Shin as a means to increase damage up, power up, potency and counter statuses, convert attack coins into unbreakable coins, and make the user faster. The point is, this is a very versatile power. And I'm sure we'll see it used in many ways, both in IDs and enemies later on, but of course, the most notorious use of Shin is in creating Mong. These rings of Shin, referred to as Lunas in Leviathan, Mong is one of the most potent weapons in a Shin user's arsenal. To put it into perspective, of the 8 known Mong users in Limbus Company, the Sinners have only been able to beat a guy who could barely manifest a single Mong after using a golden bow power. Meanwhile, most of the furry community has been shown using 2 Mong, Verge and the Indigo Elder are capable of at least 3, Jashu can create 5, and Damien can not only make 7, but also Lunas that are larger than his whole body. This man's has been training in the sensory deprivation tank and reached the wettest lunar nirvana possible to accomplish this kind of feat. But let's suppose you knew how to use Shin and wanted to create a Mong. How would you do it? Well, our first showcase of Mong is still our best example. In chapter 12 of Leviathan, Virgilius clears his mind of all but a single memory of a past Christmas at an orphanage. And I'll let him speak for himself here.
Rummaging through this bag of memories, I carefully fumble around the recollections and pick the heaviest and densest ones to fill my emptied head. A group of children about half as tall as my waist gather around me. boxes wrapped in colorful papers prepared for the kids, snow-covered streets celebrating creation. Emotions that may be trivial to others, but that are far more plentiful than I deserve. I remember every single moment of it. I engraved all of them into my eyes. The Luna of hope I felt that day, and the Luna of despair I felt that day.
By focusing on the memories a person holds closest to them, they can generate lunas of Mang by isolating emotions they pull from that memory. In this case, Virgilius created 2 with the emotions of hope and despair. And no matter what the Dead franchise tells you, neither of these emotions have to correlate with sins. They're described more like virtues, showcasing simple, undisguised feelings that generate this power. And 1 Mang generated for both hope and despair here, suggesting that the more a person is capable of processing a memory, the more Mang they can create at once. This emotional stability also brings up an interesting trend. The less experienced Mang users tend to be more brazen than the more skilled ones. While not a hard and fast rule, I think it's a great bit of storytelling that the more a character feels like they speak softly and carry a big stick, the more adept at wielding Mang they seem to be. That idea is also supported by the fact that many of the more powerful uses of Mang are considered gentle, where little to no force is put behind them. Both Verge's and Joshu's attacks are called out in a similar way, where Verge makes it clear that rather than his body, his mind is what moved to use this attack. As such, this suggests that the more vicious attacks we see with Mang from Lei Hang and the Furries are less effective than the more tranquil executions by Joshu and Damyeon. So in short, Shin and Mang are the first set of powers in PM that are trained through finding your own sense of emotional peace and channeling it on command. And that just leaves us with one question. What can we expect from Shin and Mang in the future? Well, considering that Kanto 9 is coming up and has many signs that it'll be about the fingers, the fact that we are just now getting teasers on how the pinky works, and that every character we've met in their ranks uses Shin in some way, it's very possible we'll be seeing more Shin and Mang in practice by either them, another finger, or Demyon's crew. Cause, you know, the new Blue Man group really likes making an entrance in the odd-numbered Kantos, and they talk like they snort Shin before every meeting. Hell, if Ryoshu gets pissed off enough, we might get the pleasure of getting choked by that Mang too. But that's about all I got on PM's modern power system. It really does feel like a more thoughtful expansion on what we already have. A party wants to go the whole 9 yards and talk about the first wave of the light, a summary of the pre-light power systems, and maybe a spoiler-free overview, but we'll wait and see if we got time to put those in their own tours. But for now, let's get to the Q&A section. Considering Honglu's Kanto, Honglu seems highly likely for an index ID. Which sinners do you reckon are more likely to have an index ID? Right off the cuff, Faust, Heathcliff, Otis, and Merceau, if we're gonna go this far. Faust because I could just see her getting the Yawn ID, Merceau for that good old religious symbolism, and Otis and Heathcliff because I can see the prescripts being that little allegory for a trip that has so many stops but no clear answer, you know what I'm saying? And damn, y'all want to know about ID guesses today. Any of the factions from the Kanto 8 CG with all the groups and factions in it? You know, I'm always looking to learn more about the different wings, so I think the X-Corp excavators could be a lot of fun. One of the closest corps you got to the outskirts too, so that is gonna be a lot of fun. Cause I'd like to know about the kind of fixer that works for a wing that would let someone get killed by goblins to save a microwave. Christ, that's barely even exaggerating, isn't it? Yeah, well, I think that's everything.